Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real privilege. And just a quick little bit of information on my background. So I'm not a climate scientist, neither am I an ecologist, a lawyer, or a politician. I am humbly a former occupational therapist. I was a lead occupational therapist in neurorehabilitation, and I worked in the NHS for around 15 years. So that's my professional background, which, so it's a bit of a leap from this to activism, but it's always been something I've been very passionate about. As a, I suppose, more of a passive activist many years ago. And then to say that I became part of the Citizens Assembly Working Group with Extinction Rebellion last June time, 2019. And we were focusing on researching around the third demand, which was the Citizens Assembly. So I've always been interested in the research part of aspects of the climate and ecological emergencies. So this led to my being involved in the 3 Demands Bill. I don't know if any of you remember that. It was last year. It was actually an XR project and campaign, and did actually garner support from candidates. They were electoral candidates because it was just prior to the general election in last November. And this is where the 3 demands were placed into a bill, and drafted into bill legalese, if you like. And it of course had the carbon net zero date of 2025. And this proved in the mainstream and amongst experts to be the stumbling block, really. It was an amazing rallying cry, really, to the emergencies. So we got so far with the 3 Demands Bill. And at the time I was doing a lot of interviewing with experts outside of XR, academics and some scientists, just to get their views on the principles of the 3 demands and the idea of it being encapsulated in a bill. And then after the election, as we know, the results of the election, and myself and Amy got together again and said, look, you know, she had some ideas from XR Political, and then I had done a lot of this research through the filming of the way we could look at the bill from a possible bill from a different aspect, but really heavily steeped in scientific evidence. And that's where it began in the early days of January. So the bill really is premised, well, it was inspired by a CUS paper by Professor Tim Jackson, and it's called Zero Carbon Sooner. And that paper was premised on the Paris Agreement and the pledges of that Paris Agreement around the most ambitious end of it, which is to hold global temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then along with the Paris Agreement pledges, it included CBDR, which is common but differentiated responsibilities of all the signatories in the UN, most nations in the world. I can't actually recall the exact number. It's an acknowledgement that obviously some countries should be doing more faster than others. And particularly UK in particular, having been the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution and having had this cumulative historical carbon debt, effectively. And also we are living in the minority world where, of course, our consumption levels and our carbon footprint is far larger than those in the majority world. So the idea was to somehow encapsulate these principles and this kind of framework in a bill. So we started really from scratch, and one of the first things we did was gather around us experts, and we were so fortunate to have wonderful climate scientists, ecologists, social scientists, and later on we had lawyers to help us as well. And of course, people with insight into the political and parliamentary procedures. So really, that's how it began. So the contributors on the bill include Professor Kevin Anderson and Professor Dave Golson, who is a renowned ecologist specializing in bumblebees, Dr. Charlie Gardner. He's both an ecologist and conservationist. Also, Dr. Yuri Rojerja. Excuse me if I mispronounced his name. He was one of the lead authors on the 1.5 Celsius report, the UNFCCC report, and he's a researcher at the Grantham Institute. We also had many other incredibly inspiring people to guide us. And also, right at the beginning, you're absolutely right, Vanessa. We were very fortunate to have Charles Secret, who's a former director of Friends of the Earth, who was near to the end of his tenure. He was telling us that he actually saw the beginning of the Big Ask, which was the campaign that Friends of the Earth launched, which ultimately led to the Climate Change Act of 2008. Would you like me to now just go straight on to the outline of the content of the bill? Or do you have any questions around the sort of context within which it began?
Go ahead with the next bit. Oh.
Can I ask a question now?
Yeah.
Nessy, it's just about, you've named individuals that were involved in the bill. Could you just outline the organisations that were involved in it?
Yes, of course. So it really was birthed in Extinction Rebellion, really, because that's where our small team began. So and in the political circle, so Sarah Lennon was really very much involved at the very beginning, and there was other group people, Dee and Laurie. There was a small group of us, and also, of course, there was also the Power for People. Now, they are a professional organisation. Actually, I think they're a charity that promote and help to deliver private members' bills. And we had, again, incredible privilege of have been working with Ron Bailey and Steve Shaw from that organisation. And then, of course, yes, we had our contributors, and the idea is for us to although we were, if you like, birthed within Extinction Rebellion, is to step out into an independent entity and then build our alliance. And we already have an awful lot of supporters from various organizations as individuals, but we're hoping, it takes a little time to have organizations like Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth officially as allies. Also, I've got a meeting this week with the Grantham Institute. I'm hoping to be speaking soon with the Tyndale Centre. There are others of us contacting the WWF, the WI, the National Trust, We also have at the moment individuals such as Kate Rayworth, who of course Dr. Kate Rayworth has, she founded and also researched and established the donut economy, and she has the donut economy action lab. And again, we will be speaking to them as an organization to see if they will join us. Rapid Transition Alliance, the New Weather Institute, yes, Oxfam, but this does take time and it's sort of building relationships. So what will happen is that we will become a true alliance, and that although we've written the first version of the bill, which is to be published within days of, or a week or two, it's a likely prospect that the bill will fall at the end of this parliamentary session or year, and that for the next parliamentary session, which is the next parliamentary year, which may or may not be, depending on, because of coronavirus, mid-a spring, that we can then sort of reawaken the bill. We can republish it in a even more robust form with contributions from our alliances, that's allies, that's the idea. So hopefully people also from Client Earth and Plan B, who have, of course, experts in the legal professions. So that's the idea, really. It's certainly not an XR bill. We have already established ourselves as the CE Bill Alliance as an organisation. So shall I just quickly go into the content of the bill itself?
Yes, quickly, because I've just noted we've been 20 minutes and we have lots of questions for you. So
oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, quickly, and then the questions I will put the link up on the chat.
Wonderful, thank you, Ruth. So as I said before, the bill itself is a little bit different from most bills, which are usually very prescriptive of what needs to happen when it's enshrined in law. So this bill is very much a bill of framework and principles, and it gives an overarching set of objectives to, this is, it's worded the duty of the Prime Minister to, and then you have these overarching objectives, and these include that the UK contributes fairly to holding the global temperatures to 1.5, consistent to its fair contribution. Obviously, we can't, as a country and an island, hold the global temperatures to 1.5. So, and also this whole umbrella includes that we do this in a just way. However, within those objectives, it's coupled with climate and ecology, which is what is unique, because a lot of bills or present legislation looks at either climate, like the Climate Change Act, or you have what's going through Parliament at the moment is the Environment Bill. So we wanted to couple these two, and we spoke a lot with our ecologists who really felt passionate that both of our dual crises must be treated with equal gravitas and weight. So that, for example, whilst we need to mitigate and reduce our emissions, we also need to protect nature. So what we have are this objective around the premise on the 1.5, holding to 1.5 in the global temperatures. And then we have small objectives that relate directly to protecting the ecosystems, both within our own country and related to supply chains. And then we also have stipulations around carbon sinks. So in order to reach our objectives, we've asked for a strategy to be laid out. And this strategy is not of how we will reach the objectives will be decided by three, if you like, bodies or parties. This will be Parliament, government, and the Citizens' Assembly, which will be working as like a tripartite mechanism of coming out with the recommendations to achieve the objective. Now, then you may ask, well, they can just loosely achieve those objectives in whichever way they wish. So what we did within the strategy, we pulled the strategy taut by including these really strict stipulations. And the stipulations include, for example, when it comes to accounting our emissions, rather than accounting our production-based emissions, we look at consumption-based emissions, which is when you count, obviously, all the embedded emissions within whatever we consume in the UK. So that most of our stuff that we consume is produced abroad, outsourced abroad. So we, at the moment, don't count that. But in the accounting that is in the bill, which is called, and officially is called a consumption-based accounting, it would include all our consumption emissions, plus international aviation, shipping, and land-based transport for passengers. And also everything that we produce for consumption within the UK. So the only bit that we would not count would be anything we produce within the UK for export. And the reason we have to do this is because if consumption-based accounting were adopted throughout the world, then we would want to have one form of accounting. If we were using consumption-based emission counting and France were using the production-based emission counting, then we'd have double accounting. So we'd say we imported their wine, we'd pay for the consumption emissions within the wine, but say we exported our Marmite, then we would be, so we both have to have the same kind of accounting, either both on exports or both on imports. Otherwise you end up double accounting. And in fact, I believe DEFRA, not the CCC, actually have proposed this consumption-based emissions accounting. Why do we use this in the bill? It's because we have higher consumption emissions in this way of accounting than vice versa. Presently, the production-based accounting, which is being used presently, actually on paper, as a country, we're doing really, really, really well. And our emissions are quite low. So we wanted to capture the truth of our consumption, really. And it's all, of course, linked to global equity as well. So that's one of them. The other thing with emissions mitigation is that we wanted to also circumscribe the use of nets. Everyone aware of negative emissions technologies? So again, we wanted to acknowledge that primarily we were to cut actual emissions, as in cut our emissions down from our overall emissions. Realistically, the biggest sector anyway is the energy system, and that can be done really rapidly. We have the infrastructure, we have amazing renewable energies already established, and off the back of that, so many green jobs could be created anyway that come from if there was a transference from fossil fuel intensive industries. However, we do have, and the other thing in the bill is a big emphasis on the maintenance and the active management of our natural carbon sinks. Now, we mentioned natural climate solutions, but we're actually talking about existing nature that does this amazing balancing act for us. The only bit of natural climate solutions that I'm aware of that is more sort of imposed by humans or human-induced natural climate solutions probably is afforestation, where you have cleared land and then you plant lots of the same sort of monoculture of trees. But of course, because the bill emphasises biological biodiversity and environmental maintenance and health. If you have a monoculture, obviously doesn't help biodiversity particularly. So yeah, the bill has a big emphasis on keeping the carbon sinks which are within nature as healthy and as vibrant as possible to maximize their carbon sink capacity. When carbon sinks such as peat bogs and forests and soil itself becomes, it breaks down, then it can start releasing more carbon than it absorbs. You probably already know this. So lastly, the nets, the caveats on negative emissions technologies, we stipulated within the bill, there are certain sectors, this comes again from our experts, that at the moment we cannot completely eliminate all emissions from the agricultural sector, because there's obviously nitrous oxide from fertilizers, there's methane from rumination of creatures, of mammals. So then, and also to a point, there are carbon dioxide emissions as well in all the infrastructure. So in all, at the moment, for the capacity of the agricultural sector to produce sufficient food, then there are some caveats where nets may be used for that sector. Also cement and steel in the construction industries. At the moment, cement is still the main material we use for construction, and it's actually the production of it just produces a lot of emissions. So those two sectors, which are smaller than the energy sector, there's an allowance for the use of controlled nets. Also, there are two other caveats I have to mention. In the event that the global temperatures overshoot by 1.5, and also to offset our UK's carbon historical debt, which is accumulative. Now, but when you look at the latest iteration of the bill, it clearly establishes that nets may only be used on the condition that they do not critically impact biodiversity. I think it's the health and production of food, quality of food and soils, and other aspects of societal life. So, however, how you measure what critical is, that is within the strategy for expert bodies to determine. So that in itself are the principles of the bill. I think I probably said hopefully sufficient to inspire some questions.
Yes, thank you, Nessy, so much. That's really a really good introduction. Right, so we have these questions that are on a Google Doc. I don't know whether I read them out or I put the link to them in the chat. So if people can click on that link, they'll have them. But I could just go through, and there's quite a few. And I think what I'll do is I'll read them, and then after you've finished it, maybe if the person that left the question, I'm not sure who left what question. I can see Paul's writing one now. So and we'll try and move through as quickly as we can, but also with answering questions. So shall I start at the first one? So the first 4 questions are to do with sort of clarifying the bill. So the first question is, what UK carbon reduction target is needed to fulfill the bill?
So that is a really good question, and all I can say is what we've asked is for, obviously the Climate Change Act already commissioned the CCC to set carbon budgets, and as you know, they're 5-yearly carbon budgets, and the 6th carbon budget is about to be released this November, I believe. And really it will be based on those carbon budgets, the present ones, which actually I think the targets are being missed. Some of the targets already are present targets from the CCA are being missed. So they would take these budgets, and then if something like the CEE bill were enshrined in law, they would have to draw and work out the calculations based on the principles and the stipulations, and of course extrapolate that from the current 5-yearly bill of our carbon budget. Our carbon budget would be greatly reduced, our allowance, that's our allowance of emissions, would be reduced, for example, if we were no longer looking only at production emissions, but consumption-based accounting, it's consumption emissions-based accounting instead. So that alone would then constrict our allowance in carbon budget spending, if you like, per 5 years. Then on top, of course, a lot of these carbon budgets around the world always build in the prospective nets use. And this is one of the big criticisms, that our net zero by 2050 target actually also includes the prospective use of speculative nets, most of which are still experimental phases anyway. Again, the bill stipulation would make the CCC's budgets much tauter and smaller, essentially, which would mean we would have to mitigate and cut our emissions faster. The other thing that the budget does, the bill does, is to request, instead of 5-yearly budgets, it's a yearly budget, so that there's not this big delay of a 5-year wait where there can be any kind of deferment of action. We deliberately in the bill we wanted to avoid dates and years, because I know
even though actually it might end up being sooner than 2025, or you've had it.
Yes, I mean it's very much based. I mean, this is the agility. The giving the agility of the bill means that it can also evolve with itself, with evolving science, because the science shifts. Even since the 2018 1.5 report came out, there'll be new data since then.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. The next one is how does that target differ from what is emerging as the UK's NDC for COP26?
Oh, I don't know precisely about the national developmental goals. I think that's referring to. So we don't specifically refer to those. We just talk about CBDR. Now, when we spoke to lawyers, they said this is a very loose term and it's very much based on principle and it doesn't have a lot of clout legally. However, so we're aware of this, and things like the national developmental goals in our next iteration at the end of this parliamentary session to the next one, this is why we want more specialist allies on board, particularly legal climate legal experts, for example, including those who have been part of writing the Climate Change Act, to come on board, because we haven't encapsulated all of the principles of the Paris Agreement. So one of the things that's missing is Article 2.1c in the Paris Agreement, which talks about financial flows. And financial flows are really closely related to the national developmental goals. So this is something we need to have as part of our next iteration of our bill. So I haven't answered that question particularly well. I realise it's slightly evasive, but it's also because of every bill is imperfect, and it's something that we will be working on more specifically, because we've had that critique, and justifiably so.
The next shall I give you two questions? Maybe they are very different. Why does the bill not address the potential consequences of climate change already inevitable, adaptation, preparedness and resilience? And then the next one is, what happens if we breach 1.5 degrees, as we could within the next few years?
They're both excellent questions. I mean, the first question talks more to maybe the solutions. I'm not sure. I'm sorry if I'm misinterpreting that question, but if it's specifically to adaptations and what we should do to prepare ourselves. As I said, the bill really was specifically designed to be one of framework and principles and not prescriptive at all. The prescription will come out of the strategy, which will be determined by government, would be determined by government, parliament, and the citizens' assembly, the emergency citizens' assembly that would be called and it would be as a tripartite consultation. And those recommendations, because it would be, if it were a piece of law, would then have to be enacted and implemented. And within the bill, there's a set time that all this has to happen. The second question, which was about, sorry, Ruth, can you just
reach? We're like,
oh, yes, reaching, yes, of course. Which, yes, I mean, in many reports, including the 1.5C 2018 UNFCCC report, is certainly spoke to that. And this is why there's that caveat about the use of nets in the event of an overshoot of 1.5 degrees Celsius, in the likely event of it. In their report, the 1.5 report, they talk of a temporary overshoot and bringing a reversal back to 1.5. And they do talk about the use of nets. So we did have to build that consideration into our bill, because we really, as I say, we really needed the bill to align to the science, or to the best scientific evidence that was available and that is available.
Okay, I'm going to keep going on the questions, and then maybe there'll be time at the end for the people that haven't had their question answered well enough, if that's okay.
Yes.
So the big question for me really is, as sort of the person that gets the emails from all these different organisations, why should we campaign on the CEE bill rather than the Climate Coalition's declaration or Build Back Better? Or there's so many campaigns out there.
Yes, and they are incredibly valid and valuable, and of course emerged way before this bill. We are aware of this, but I think the impetus and incentive of this bill was that we are at a critical juncture with so little time, and we have this very, very small window. And I think it was really that we felt that we have this period between now and COP26, and we wanted something that would be a parliamentary tool. Having had this wonderful, we've got this wonderful expert knowledge and wisdom from Charles Secret, who told us the story of how the Big Ask came to be this trailblazing piece of legislation. And as far as we know, I think there's the Green New Deal bill, there's lots of initiatives, but we haven't yet seen any similar type of bill that is one built on these kind of principles and framework that encapsulates the dual crises that's happening now. So I think it was, whereas all the other campaigns are so valid, but this is a very, very, it's quite a short-term, sharp push with very specific goals in mind, which is a grassroots campaign and a bottom up, top down campaign to push through what would be, when you think of it, probably the most effective way for transformative change to happen, which is through legislation. And when you think that the coronavirus bill as an emergency measure I believe went through the Commons and the Lords in a matter of days. And if you actually relate the coronavirus and you see it as a symptom of the climate and ecological emergency, then it's clear how potent and powerful bills can be in implementing legislation that then will hold the government to account. The other thing is we wanted something also that was really strident, and a strident message for COP26. We've got this moment where actually we're going to be co-hosting COP26. And again, it's this vehicle that's very, very specific and potentially potent, with a particular timeline, a very, very particular timeline, just 1 year now. I'm not sure if that answered the question quite. But
Yes, that was great. And I suppose it's maybe that's sort of what you're saying, but is there something that tells the truth more in this bill than in the other campaigns?
I think it tries to distill it. It tries to distill it and capture it in a relatively lightweight bill. I mean, it's only, is it 7 pages? Or for a bill, it's really, really short and small and very agile. And also it has because of its permeability, with each iteration, we can bring on board powerful allies with all their expertise. So that is really the strength behind it, having this alliance.
Okay, I'm going to carry on. Thank you. How might we campaign for COP26 on this bill in a way that minimises public confusion and maximises synergy? I suppose, yeah, with the, I mean, you want, with the climate, particularly with the Climate Coalition, I mean, why are they not backing this bill? Or maybe they are, or, you know, why are they, I guess they got started before this, you know.
I believe that there's a group of us who are definitely really keen to work closely with them. And I believe we're probably going to try and exchange, you know, and engage in being mutual allies, hopefully. Absolutely. We certainly don't want to set ourselves up in competition. It absolutely has to be about alliances. Because ultimately, all these wonderful movements have ultimately the same aim, really. Of course, we have through our website, we have the way you sign up and you actually write your MP and so forth. And we're actually, you know, we now have, I think it's 72 MPs who've signed the bill to back the bill. We have an EDM. We still need a full cross-party, so we definitely need to appeal somewhere along the line to the Conservatives as well, sectors of the Conservatives.
Yes, one of the questions was, actually, I'll jump to that one, was how are we planning to minimise the risk of political polarisation?
Such a good question, and it is a big challenge. We have our political circle, and we have some, as well as Charles, we have Oliver, who has also has incredible experience. He's worked in the House of Lords. So we definitely have a political strategy, and it's really important we're seen as cross-party and we're not seen as partisan to either left or right, or at the moment it may look as if it's partisan to the left. So we definitely have to find sympathy, and we have to be able to relate to Conservatives of different hues. I mean, there's One Nation Conservatives, that, you know, it's quite a spectrum, really. And we have had some definite core mutual principles that are shared between those in the Conservative Party or MPs and what principles we have in the bill. So we are definitely working that. We have had lots of meetings, and we are building our healthy rebuttals about why it will be a benefit to all. But yeah, we are really focusing on the importance of that, particularly with our bill launch. It's going to be launched by Caroline Lucas in a few weeks. We're going to have a full bill launch and an NGO launch with it. So yeah, it's really very important we reach out also to slightly more conservative leaning organisations as well. And also in the House of Lords, where we have a lot of sympathetic ears in the House of Lords.
I'm not keeping an eye on the chat. Is there something in the chat? Should we just have a quick look at the chat? Oh, sorry, I've missed all this. Shall I just read through from? Okay, there will presumably need to be some expert panel which synthesises rapidly developing science and translates it into policy for particular emission targets at national level. Yes, I suppose that was answering that question we had before, I think. Yeah. Appeal to traditional conservative values of conserving, yes. Can we have a list of the MPs? Yes, there is a list somewhere, Sue. In that case, do we need to divorce the bill completely from XR? I guess it will be diluted, won't it? The more other people get involved.
Well, actually, we're now we're a separate organisation. We've been registered as so as well, as an organisation, its own right, with its name, CEE Bill Alliance. And actually, we have massive gratitude to Extinction Rebellion, and they are a massive ally of ours. But that's how we hope that we will be seen as an organisation that includes, as a very, very strong ally, Extinction Rebellion. Whilst we certainly don't want to divorce our beginnings from Extinction Rebellion, it's really important that we are seen as our independent entity. So I suppose to ensure that people don't call it the XR bill would be a good start, but definitely it's wonderful to acknowledge the historic ties, but we are now fully established separately, and that's how we approach our other allies, and we will openly share the other allies that are with us on the CE Bill Alliance.
Okay, I'll carry on down the list if that's okay. What's the likelihood of major NGOs supporting you, and if they will not, why will they not?
Oh, that's really good. Well, we're extremely close. A lot of, for example, Friends of the Earth, they have huge grassroots and are, if you like, devolved, and they have local and regional groups. And so and also all these NGOs have their own priorities and their own campaigns and their own funding issues that they have to look after. So obviously we have to appreciate that, and we are negotiating. And so, for example, Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace absolutely on principle support the principles of the bill. They cannot actually publicly yet support the bill on principle until they've had agreement throughout all their organisation. And because a lot of these NGOs are quite traditional, and some of which are hierarchical, of course they have to go through all these procedures really clearly and with time. And also, as I say, they have their own priorities, their own campaign priorities as well. But we've been doing lots of negotiating, and we're very, very close. The same with the grant. What we've got are individuals within the organisation, prominent individuals who individually will publicly back it, but it has to be on agreement of across the board. I suppose they have their boards of directors and so forth before. So, for example, tomorrow, tomorrow I have a meeting with the Grantham Institute. But we have had really favourable tweets from the Grantham Institute. I'm also in touch with the Tyndale Centre, but as you know, Professor Kevin Anderson was a contributor on the bill. So we're very, very close. And the same with Kate Rateworth, as I said before. I'm approaching Oxfam. A lot of people are doing a lot of positive work. 38 Degrees are now formally supporting us. We have a list, and when we have the Nation Builder website, the whole list will be there with all our supporters, including organisations.
I'll carry on down the list. So for engaging the general public, are there plans for a more engaging, attractive campaign brand?
Huh? This is definitely what we're actually coming up with. We're voting on a campaign name at the moment, I think within days. So our present website will be replaced by Nation Builder. And we now have comms and we now have branding. So yes, that's all in development. Bearing in mind, we started really small, and for the up to about a week ago, we were all volunteers completely for the 9 months. So it's been quite an achievement for people who are volunteering their time. So we didn't have the funding behind us to have the kind of infrastructure that big NGOs have.
I've got a question here about a question we need to just Christian reps need to discuss. How would a CEE bill campaign for churches look like? I don't know if that's anything you could say about that, or whether that's something we have to take ourselves.
I know that we are approaching we have many aspects of society that we really want on board and to become allies. So I think I'd have to leave that to you, all of you, actually.
Okay. Done that one. There was one about who are we doing for questions? There's one about citizens' assemblies. Please, can you clarify details on citizens' assemblies? Is it for the implementation of the bill, or is it more generally? And in which case, key points of difference from the Climate Assembly UK? I think you've sort of dealt with the citizens' assemblies earlier, but I don't know if you dealt with that last question, in which case, key points of difference from the Climate Assembly UK.
Yes, that's right. The Climate Assembly to UK had very particular question posed, and it was about, I can't remember the wording, but it was about how will we reach carbon net zero by 2050 or something to that effect. So it had a specific remit, and it had 2050, which in many points of view, that is not soon enough. And in our bill, of course, there has many sort of stricter stipulations about faster and deeper mitigation. And then, of course, aspects, very big, equally weighty aspects on ecology. I'm not sure how much of biodiversity was addressed during the UK Climate Assembly. And also, I don't know how much was addressed around global equity. And for example, supply chains. What about the ecological footprint of our supply chains on other countries, including pollution, land degradation, and of course, deforestation. So there were aspects that weren't actually addressed in the UK Climate Assembly. Also, it's the one within our bill is very specifically to help meet the objectives through the strategy. So it's got a very specific aim and remit. And actually the question is different, really, when you look at it. It's the same subject, but it's a different question. A different set of stipulations altogether.
Thank you. This is, I feel like, yeah, and this is like an interrogation, Nessy. I'm so sorry. We are so thankful for you coming. And I'm just trying to get through all these questions in a short space of time, but just to say thank you very much. The next one is it's basically a sort of statement of rather than a question. And it goes through basically, well, I'll just read it through. The fact doc meant that FAQ doc mentions the 2005 Big Ask leading to the CCA, leading to the Climate Change Act in 2008 many times. But then there's a list of all the the benefits that that had. For example, it had the support of 100 NGOs, businesses. It was a truly cross-party effort. 412 out of 612 MPs had signed the motion. The Conservative Party ran their local elections with Vote Blue, Grow Green, which we don't have now. It was the same time as the Stern Review. Therefore, its success was due to 4 factors: the NGO campaign, the political competition, the reframing of climate change as an economic issue, and an engaged political owner within the government. And I guess what it's saying is we don't have that. I don't know if you want to say anything, simply that, you know, yes,
they're very different times indeed. I don't think there's a like for like at all here. I mean, just the political environment, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. I mean, it's unprecedented times actually, even compared to then, I would say. And also I do believe, but I may be wrong here, where I'm being recorded, but I believe the first 6 months of the Big Gas campaign was very much the beginning of when the Big Gas campaign was on its own for quite a while before it really gathered pace and also had so much support from NGOs. So I think the first half a year, I believe, was very much doing the sort of groundwork, laying the foundations before it really took off. But yeah, they were very different times. But on the other hand, we have a critical period now. We have the WWF reports on massive biodiversity loss. We have the COP26 in a year's time, which will be probably the most important COP ever that we've had, and will be a turning point. I think we have a massive incentive to actually gain a momentum here with this bill. I do appreciate it, but there were very different times.
Thank you. Oh, I was unmuted. Good. Okay. The MP's responses. Of course, the first response that I heard about is it is only a presentation bill, so there's no point in supporting it. I know on your FAQs you have something about that. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say about that.
Yes, I mean, of course, we understand that it is only a presentation bill. First of all, the fact that, as we know, the Big Ask and which became the Climate Change Bill Act, and then the Act started as only a presentation bill. So, and there are other successes of private members' bills going through. But we already have early day motions signed that started and is gathering a pace. And there are other ways that a bill can be presented. There's a ballot bills, and then there's a bill through the House of Lords. There are different ways. And to be very honest, I don't think if we are going to take it on its, just have this, oh well, it's just look at the likelihood that it will fall. Well, we will have the next parliamentary session, and by which time there will be such a swell, there's be a grassroots momentum. This is what we're aiming for, that by April it will have, and so many MPs will be aware of it. And if we can get constituents of all political hues to hear about it and have their constituents saying, you need to look at this is absolutely of critical importance, and this is number one to why we want what we want you to represent our constituency for, then we actually believe it is absolutely possible. Of course, also we have a lot of, if we can build our lives to that point where there's that cornering where there is just no option to say no. There's no reason to say no. At the moment, other bills are taking a long time to go through. If you look at the environment bill, has anyone had a chance to look at it? There are areas that will need more rigor. It also takes time to go through. I think really what we need to be saying is, this is an emergency. These are those principles. If the government and each MP is standing for the safety of their constituents, for the safety and well-being of their constituents and their families and their children and their own children, why would you not support these emergency measures? So rather than focus on it's only a presentation bill, focus on the critical principles that are held within this bill. I'm glad I got a thumbs up, Jeff. Thank you. I'm worried I'm not answering these questions well enough.
Oh, you're doing so well. There's only 3 more. Citizens' assemblies undermine our democratic system. Only Parliament has the democratic mandate.
Okay, that's very interesting. So it is true. That's why the Citizens' Assembly is built into the bill, because if it's built into the bill, then it will have a full democratic mandate from Parliament and the government itself. So in that case, it can be seen as really a mechanism that will empower MPs. Their present mandate, it makes it even more empowering for the MPs, because, as I say, the kind of measures that need to be taken are unprecedented in probably kind of human history, really. So in order for MPs not to be usually hamstrung by manifestos or the whip or the next electoral cycle that they're worried that they have to just focus on, this allows MPs to say something quite transformative has to happen. If we've had the mandate from deliberative democracy through a citizens' assembly, where a representation of society have actually also been involved in making those recommendations, then that gives MPs a greater mandate to make the changes, not a lesser one. I think, Jeff, did you want to ask something?
Is that okay, Ruth, to follow up that question?
Absolutely, please. Yeah.
Parliament has already accepted the principle of citizens' assemblies. We've had one, all right? So I don't think we need to be anxious about that, except for the point that we already have one. So I think the challenge for us is, how do we communicate with MPs and the public to make the point that we do need another citizens' assembly? The problem with the last one, as I understand it was predicated on 2050. So there's my question.
That's correct, Jeff, absolutely. And also, though, it wasn't commissioned by government. It was commissioned by the six parliamentary select committees prior to the election. Many of those MPs lost their seats, and they weren't front benchers. So although it was incredibly well carried out, assembly members did a wonderful job, and they produced an amazing set of recommendations. It isn't, there's no requirement of the government to follow through. It may end up as a consultative exercise. So what we need is a government commissioned citizens' assembly, so that any recommendations coming from those are then fully implemented and, of course, financed and funded as well by the Treasury.
I've got 2 more questions and then we can open it out. So are there any Tory MPs who are sympathetic? And Tory MPs will usually come back with what the government's already doing on key points. Could we have a comparison chart of their standard responses and the CEE bill target, and the reason why the current policies are inadequate for use in engaging MPs?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And yes, we are collecting all the rebuttals and responses from MPs. And one of particularly, I think, from Conservative MPs is that there's already policy in place. We have the Climate Change Act and the Environment Bill going through. So what we are doing now is I'm actually coordinating the research team. We have a little research circle. So we're doing a timeline of doing some cross-referencing of the government's policies to presently, including their targets, if they've hit the targets that the CCC, their own commissioned body, have set for them in their carbon budgets, and we know that they've missed targets. We're also going to look at the Environment Bill and look at the loopholes within the Environment Bill. As you know, that was set up as we've left the EU regs on around the environment. So we're doing our timeline, so we have really strong, well-researched rebuttals. And I think if they want to engage in a really intelligent debate, then through this research we can start engaging, and then if we can argue strongly, then I think ultimately if they really feel genuinely concerned about the crisis, they would come on board, they wouldn't rebuff us. So it's about building your research, being very gracious, but very thorough with your rebuttals and your responses, and always inviting and always seeing, you know, whether you're Conservative or Labour, you all have values around nature, for example. The Conservatives equally as much as Labour, they express it in different ways. They talk about, maybe rather than equality and fairness, they talk about responsibility and duty. But conservatism is also about pastures, about conservation, you know, about having the rural idyll. So there's definitely concerns, and there's way, and we just have to approach it slightly differently. But the sensibilities are equal. We're all humans, after whatever our colours, ultimately.
Do we have any Tory MPs who might be?
We do. We are engaging, actually, and I'm not on the political circle, so I'm not sure of all that's happening there. But I do know that they have already had some Zoom meetings with Tory MPs. They're very important that we engage. Very, very important. We're fully aware they hold a majority Parliament.
Great. That is all the questions from the list, but can I open it up to anyone out there who has any more questions for you? Yeah, just unmute yourself and ask, I think. Michelle.
Just a quick on Nessy. Sorry if this is not a very intelligent question, but I've been asked this by someone who's emailed me, and they wanted to know, is the date, and I want to know, is the date of the second reading set in stone? Because that seems such a long time away.
It's not, actually. It was something like the 2nd of March or something. And then the second reading, apparently there's several bills that can be read, I think, before yours, and there's an order of reading, and then there's this very constrained time of when a number can be read out. So we don't know, and we're not holding out for that, actually. That's where we have to look at all the other ways we can. I mean, for example, one of the ideas is to build the CEE bill in as amendments to the Climate Change Act. So we've been working with lawyers, so that's another way in. It doesn't actually matter how we get in with our principles, as long as somehow they get into law, really. Mm-hmm. So yes, one of them is to build in amendments into the current law as a secondary legislation. That's another possibility. So that's why if ever you get people to saying it's only a presentation bill, that shouldn't be a reason to stop. There are so many other avenues to take. Ruth, you're on mute.
Any other questions? Just unmute yourself and dive in. Ashley, do you have a question?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Nessy, I noticed in your briefing papers you had that point you just made, that important thing is the principles. It's not so much getting, because I too, like so many of us, are with a Conservative MP, and he doesn't, on principle, sign early gay motions.
That's
Most of
right.
them don't. Okay, but I think that it would be really helpful. You did pick up a couple of things in your briefing papers. It might be helpful if you could just give some short briefings on the main principles of the bill, so that when the MP says, well, you know, it's only a presentation, I say, well, what do you think about, you had aviation, I think, was one. You know, if you could give us a lot of briefing paper on what we could say the bill is asking for in aviation and what it's asking for on the other points, that might.
Yes, thank you very much, Barbara. I'm going to take this to the our research circle, because we need to get all this material out to you, so then you can just come back with nice, firm, you know, arguments such as that. As you say, even if it's just taking pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to write that down. Sue.
Yes, go ahead, Sue.
On the webinar that I saw, the pre-rebellion webinar that you did, Nessy, Charles Secret made that point, didn't he? He said that they would be bringing out discussion papers on the points, on all the detailed points of this during the course of the coming year, so that we won't be campaigning in a vacuum. We shall be guided by
Yes,
good and updated information as we go along.
yes. Well, it's probably about now. We're just waiting for the latest. So the iteration you have on the website is now old. I mean, the principles will be the same, but it's been bolstered up. Yes, there were quite a few late nights, so it is better because I was liaising with some really good experts. So apart from the new website and the fully published bill that will be about a couple of weeks, we also have strategic plans. So if I don't know the best way to, because we now have a grassroots circle as well. So we will be feeding that into our grassroots circle and our allies circle. I don't know if you would belong to our allies circle, although I haven't even politely asked you if you want to even officially become an ally. So I'm making assumptions here, which I shouldn't do. But either way, we need to give you the information in a kind of organized manner. I don't know what the best way that would be. Obviously, there would be things on the new Nation Builder website, but is there another way that you would like to receive it? Is it through your group? Or you may maybe send requests through as a group of what you need, materials you need, or the strategy plan, or maybe that's a way.
What do you think, Paul? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of groups represented here. I mean, CCA and Green Christian are the main ones, but I would hope that we reach the churches, you know, eventually in quite a mainstream kind of way. This group itself doesn't have any identity, corporate identity, unless we choose to reconvene. And I think there needs to be some way in which we continue this conversation amongst ourselves about how to organise coherently across the churches. And for that, I think we need an interface with your campaign, Nessy.
That would be wonderful.
Just as you're talking about, it's really important, I think, that we keep the lines of communication clean
yes.
within the churches, and to ensure that there's consistency of messages, and
definitely,
you know, archbishops aren't being approached by different people saying slightly different things, kind of thing. That's
an excellent idea. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the obvious network for ecumenical collaboration is the Environmental Issue Network of Churches Together in Britain and Ireland, but it's had a rather cool response, I think, I gather, from like when the CEE bill was mentioned, was raised at the last meeting. not to be daunted. I think we have to build our alliances within the churches to start with, and Green Christian and I guess CCA are both already committed to supporting this. So maybe there's just a way then that those two organisations form a kernel of a Christian network that can engage with more mainstream opinion within the churches.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, who would the key Ruth? Who would be the key person that I could coordinate with, at least for CCA and Green Christians? Would it be through you, Ruth?
Yeah, use me for the moment. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Would it be possible, as Michelle, Barbara, or anyone else, if you're getting responses from your MPs, to sort of collate the question, the kind of, or the rebuttals you get of, oh, we don't want to support this because I will make this Thursday, I can make it priority that we provide you with the kind of responses that are really specific. And it will be really kind of very well, properly sculptured so that people can come back with their, relevant rebuttals. So do send them, maybe through Ruth, and I'll pick them up and I'll look at.
I haven't contacted my MP specifically on the CEE bill.
No, that's but if you have any people, if you know anyone who's
my question was preemptive, so that I would be forearmed before contacting him.
Would you be able to even send that one to Ruth, your question, because it's a brilliant question, just so that, just even if I have a list of a few, and then we can start working on them. We've got quite a good group of researchers who are delving into things like the Environment Bill and the Climate Change Act and so forth. That would be wonderful. Thank you. I hope I've answered your questions and that I can pick up my mastermind prize. I was the only candidate anyway.
Nessy, thank you so much. I feel like you've been like, you have been like in the mastermind chair or a torturer's chair.
I don't even know if I've actually answered the questions well. That's what worries me.
No, you've answered so well. I've typed most of them up actually onto that document that you will have a link to. So if there's any you want to have a look at, that's what I've done. And if there's anyone else that has any other comments before we go in the next few minutes. No, I don't think so.
Just if I'm right about CCA and Green Christian being the two organisations that pick the ball up, I wonder if it's just worth being clear amongst ourselves how that will happen, because so we've got, Green Christian got a trustees meeting in a couple of weeks, I think. I think probably we're needing some resources to go public with. We're not ready for doing a lot yet. I'm not quite. I don't know how CCA would want to play it, but you're a good point of contact between them both of us anyway, Ruth.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think I've got a CCA group. Some of them were here today, and some of them make it. So yes, we'd then have a meeting and decide where to go after that. And of course, CCA's response would be to have a look at the direct action side of it and how much, whether we can, what else we could do on the direct action side in terms of raising awareness to this bill. But then also they'll start off obviously with just writing to their MP. And then with Green Christian, we've already got a page on the website, haven't we? So we've already put our neck out a bit.
Yeah, well, we can make more noise, Ruth, in getting our members involved. As long as we can give them a good briefing, try and encourage them to write,
yes,
get in touch with their MPs, so we can do more on that line from Green Christian.
And I suppose the one thing is what we can do about EIN. Is there anything more we can do with EIN?
Well, maybe we should go back to them, because as I understand it, their objection was just what Nessy's been saying about so much. You know, it's a, or whatever, the presentational bill, and therefore it won't get anywhere, and so it's a waste of time spending time on it.
Yeah.
Well, we've got the rebuttal on that. Maybe
Yes.
we should think about writing back to them and say, well, look, okay, it is worth getting.
Yeah. I mean, Nessy, have you been? Have you had any contact with Christian Aid and CAFOD and Tier Fund, the Christian NGOs?
We are actually, someone is going to, I'm approaching Oxfam because I do have a contact, but Christian Aid's Amy, I think, is going to approach Christian Aid, definitely. They're really important organisations we have to approach. Global Witness also, CAFOD, no, I think they're all on our priority list. We've just been, because we're a band of volunteers up to now, we're a bit spread thinly. But they are definitely on our because I saw the list today. Actually, I was looking because I remember volunteering to approach Oxfam as soon as possible. It's just really important.
Great. So I think that'll do. I think you can go and make yourself a cup of tea and take a deep breath, Nessy. Oh,
Ruth,
another question.
Just can I ask a quick question? It's probably the nastiest one you're going to get. Scale of 1 to 10, how positive do you think you're going to be with getting the bill through?
Oh.
10.
10, thank you. Thanks, Dora. 10 being the highest, of course. 10, actually.
Eventually.
Absolutely. I mean, if we don't know, we didn't know that this pandemic would happen. We didn't know. I mean, it's unprecedented times. I think even the government are quite, it's an unusual time for the government themselves. There's been a lot of, and also I think our ultimate goal, we do have contact with the United Nations Deputy Secretary. So our big aim is also to reach out to the government for their platform on COP26. And that's what we're really aiming for. So we actually don't even think of failing, because if we did, we'd all probably stop and crumble. So we don't. That's not even a doubt that it's not anything more than 10.
And listening to Charles' secret earlier, I think that he's so experienced and has
Absolutely
a lot of background in this, and is quite sure that we shall win this.
Oh, absolutely. You've got, absolutely. I mean, imagine, yes, absolutely.
So we go with that, I think.
Yeah.
And I think any of us who have younger people around us, or children or potential children, it's just no question that we can possibly fail. We have to succeed. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Nessy.
Yes.
I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, everyone. So I'll wait before I actually announce that formally Green Christians and CCA are formal allies. I'll wait till you've written to confirm that. Maybe I should, because you need to speak to other people and.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's useful to know that, because that's the decision that we need to make at our next meeting.
Yes. Yeah. So wait for that.
Okay.
So
thanks very much indeed.
If you ever want to speak to Charles, for example, he's always very happy to speak, and so do let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Lot.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you very much indeed.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.